Hello and welcome to The Signal, WorkplaceNL's health and safety podcast. WorkplaceNL is the Workers' Compensation Board in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The focus is to promote safe and healthy workplaces, provide return-to-work programs, and offer compensation to injured workers and their dependents. This series of podcasts will provide you with the latest information on how workplaces can protect the health and safety of workers. Please enjoy the show.
Workers who work with tools, machinery, and equipment are required to follow lockout, tagout requirements as outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Occupational Health and Safety Regulations. Lockout is the isolation of energy from any type of energy system that physically locks the system in a safe mode. Tagout is a labeling process that is always used when lockout is required. Employers implement lockout-tagout programs. Workers follow the requirements of this program and any safety precautions that have been put in place to protect their health and safety of others. This partnership is important in creating and maintaining a safety culture where everyone knows and understands their roles and responsibilities in keeping themselves and others healthy and safe. I'm DeeAnne Feltham-Scott, Health and Safety Educational Consultant in Prevention Services at WorkplaceNL. Today I'm joined by Dion Newman, Executive Director of the Forestry Safety Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Thank you, Dion, for joining me here today to talk about lockout tagout. So let's just begin with a little bit of background in your work history and your work experience, and I guess your interest in lockout tagout and the importance of putting lockout tagout procedures in place and following them.
Well, presently, I'm the Executive Director of the Forestry Safety Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. As a part of my job, speaking to companies about lockout, tagout, helping them with their programs, and even offering the training is paramount to people's safety. That goes from the sawmills to the pulp mill, even to the heavy equipment and things of that are used in the forest industry. My background, before I got involved with forestry, I used to work at the gypsum plant here in Corner Brook. And when I first started, I was a forklift operator. I spent a few months in the shipping department, and then I was moved to the finished end department. So I was still a forklift operator in that particular area, but I was working with two other people in that area as well. So one night, it was a Sunday night, night shift. I had just got moved into this department, my first week, and as usual, I was just taking the drywall, putting it in the warehouse with the forklift. When I came back, I noticed there was a lot of chaos. So I got off my forklift, I went over to the other two people, and I said, "What's going on?" Apparently there was a jam up inside the dryer that caused a number of sheets of drywall to stack on top of each other. And when it came out of the dryer, it came down to the finish end where we were working, and it caused the equipment to jam up.
Right.
So I said to the person in charge of the area, I said, "Well, what do we have to do?" And he said, "Well, we got to get in around that equipment and clear that jam." And I asked him, I said, "Is it safe for us to do that?" Because at that point, like, we had never heard of lockout or anything like that. So basically what the procedure was back then in 99 was we would shut the equipment down and then get in around the equipment, clear the jam, start everything up again, because, again, it's a production environment. And that's one of the areas where you see a lot of times that people will not properly de-energize and lock out equipment.
Right.
Because as quick as we can get production up and running again, that's what we need to do.
So this is a good time then to define and talk about what is lockout tagout.
Well, lockout and tagout is the de-energization of equipment, verifying that it is properly de-energized, and putting a lock of some sort on a particular device to prevent the equipment being re-energized. Mm-hmm. And the different energy sources, you could have pneumatic, which is air. You can have hydraulic. You can have kinetic energy, electrical. So there's many different sources of energy. And people need to properly identify all sources of energy and make sure that they're de-energized and they can't be re-energized while they're working, doing maintenance, clearing jams or whatever.
Right. What is the best way for them to identify those sources of energy that need to be locked out?
Well, there should always be a hazard assessment that is done, no matter what type of work that you're doing. But companies should have a procedure put in place that shows the employee which energy sources they should be concerned about. And with the equipment being properly tagged, again, like I said, when you look at an electrical motor, for example, the electrical lead going into that motor should be marked with an identification tag, and the point where that is de-energized in the electrical room or panel or wherever should have that same identification tag. So once that has been verified that that is the de-energization point, again, like I said, it's properly shut down, there's a lock put in place, and then they verify to make sure that the equipment cannot be restarted.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would imagine that lockout, tagout procedures can get pretty complicated depending on the industry and the machinery and the equipment. It could be just a matter of one lock, one tag. But I guess in some cases, it could be a number of locks and tags that are in circulation. So what is the best way for an employer to keep track of what is locked out, who's doing the lockout, and when that procedure or that work activity, I should say, is actually completed? What is the best way for the employer to manage that whole system?
Well, that would be up to the supervisor, obviously, to make sure that everything is done properly in the way that it should be. But when it comes to multiple pieces of equipment, or say, for example, in a sawmill, there's multiple pieces of equipment or multiple energy sources on a piece of equipment that needs to be locked out, that there's a group lockout done. And, right. Of course, like I said, your procedures are in place, and the competent and qualified people who know how to do that group lockout will complete that. And then, of course, everybody else who's working on that equipment would add their locks to that lockbox. And again, like I said, your procedures and everything are there in plain view, and you can verify what equipment has been shut down, locked out. And again, what's also recommended as well is a sealed tag would go on that lockbox to prevent anybody from tampering it with
right.
it, and to make sure that between shifts that, again, like I said, the box wasn't open and the keys weren't taken out.
Right. And it's one lock per worker.
It depends upon the work site. Sometimes you can get 5 or 6 locks because it depends on how many group lock boxes that you got to put a lock on. I have seen 2. I have seen, like I said, 6. It all depends upon the requirement for that particular company.
Right. Why is lockout tagout so important?
Well, we've seen, unfortunately, many documented cases where people have had very severe injuries. And unfortunately, we've also seen many fatalities.
Yeah.
And like I said, going back to my situation that night, I had asked the person who was in charge of the area, was it safe for us to get in there? And he went back to the panel and he looked at the panel and he said, this is shut off, this is shut off. And he went through and made sure everything was shut off on that panel. Now, the equipment on both sides of that equipment was still running. Mm-hmm. And there was still board coming out of the dryer, and it was being ran off on a reject table. So the third person working with us was responsible to make sure that board kept coming out, and they were clearing it away from the table so it continued to come out so they wouldn't have to shut down production. When the person in charge of the area said, yeah, it's safe for us to get in there, again, like I said, I had never heard of Lockout before. This guy was supposed to know what we were supposed to do, so I followed him. And we were working on the side of the Booker arms. And the Booker arms are these steel arms that come up from the table and take 2 sheets of drywall and put them face to face. Mm-hmm. And then it'll go down on the right-hand side, and both sheets will be stacked on top of each other. So we're hauling this wet drywall from between these arms, and I hauled on one piece of board, and I heard a click, and that was the limit switch. When I activated the limit switch, these arms that were supposed to be shut off weren't actually shut off.
Wow.
And the arms started to come down. He was on the slower moving side of the arms, and he pushed himself back from the arms, and the corner of the steel arm hooked in the top part of his thigh, and it cut his leg right down to the top of his work boot. And I was on the other side, the faster moving side, because when the arms come down, there was no board on them, so they can go down faster. And it hit me in the center of my chest. And I was able to push away from the arms, because if I didn't, it would have squat me between the arm and a steel rail that the arms went down underneath, and it would have sliced me in half. So like I said, I pushed myself back away from it, and I landed on the live rollers. So the rollers are turning underneath me, but I can't move. I can't get up out of it. And then I look to see that my ankle is caught in a space about 1 inch wide between that arm and the steel rail. And, of course, it's a hydraulic arm, so it's still trying to go down further.
That's right.
So while I'm looking at it, and I'm kind of in disbelief, I'm like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And then the board that's coming out of the dryer hits me, because I'm on the live rollers in the path of this board. So it kind of twisted me to the side, and I was having to try to surf this hot board underneath me as I'm caught by my ankle. And the third person that was working with us went into a state of mental shock. They were just standing there looking at us with his mouth open.
Absolutely.
Couldn't call for help, couldn't do nothing. So luckily, one of the people working upstairs had come down to the basement, and as they walked down to the stairs, they seen what was going on and got the equipment shut down and managed to get me out of it.
Right. So, I mean, as you're telling me the story, you know, it's taking a couple of minutes, but this is all happening in a matter of seconds.
Exactly.
And you are reacting in a very, very short time period. If the situation was any different, you could have been more seriously injured or even worse.
Absolutely.
So this was 1999.
Yes.
We're now into 2024. Legislation does require that employers have lockout, tagout procedures and a program. So what is required in those lockout, tagout procedures?
Well, again, like I said, all energy sources are supposed to be identified.
Right.
They're supposed to be properly de-energized. It's supposed to be verified that those energy sources cannot be re-energized before anybody goes to work. And again, like I said, an appropriate means, such as a lock, is supposed to be put on a device to prevent the re-energization of any equipment.
And it's all sources of energy.
All sources of energy. And again, like I said, when it comes to a piece of equipment in a facility, for example, like I said, there could be many different sources. So like I said, that table that I was on that night, there was pneumatic, air pressure. Yeah. There was hydraulic, which was the issue that I was dealing with. There was electrical. So there was multiple sources. And as a result of that incident, the plant was shut down for a couple of days. And during the investigation, it was found that there was actually no power shut off for those hydraulic arms on that panel. You actually had to go to the electrical panel, which was about 100 feet away, and shut them off in the electrical room.
Right. So a major design flaw there.
Absolutely. And the person who was there with me that night, who had went through and thought everything was shut off,
Right.
we couldn't hear the hum from those hydraulic motors because all the other equipment was running.
That, to me, draws so much attention to the importance of education and training.
Absolutely.
You have to know what to do. What types of education and training does your industry do with regards to lockout, tagout?
Well, there are companies such as ours that do offer a lockout training program.
Yeah.
And there are other companies within the forest industry, such as Cornbrook Pulp and Paper, that has their own very intensive lockout, tagout program.
Right.
And they do a really good job over at the mill making sure that workers are properly protected when it comes to lockout. That's one thing that there's zero tolerance for.
Yeah.
Is making sure things are properly locked out.
Absolutely. I just want to return back to your story as well, or to your experience. Was there an emergency stop button on that piece of equipment?
There was emergency stop buttons, and all those buttons were pressed on that particular panel. But like I said, there was no actual shut off or emergency stop for those hydraulic arms until that incident. And then there was buttons installed in the panel.
So something major had to happen before it was recognized. But if the hazard assessment, risk assessment was done, that would have been noted.
Definitely.
So what changes have you seen since then?
Well, in that particular situation, there was intensive lockout training that was done with all the employees. And again, like I said, lockout was, again, taken very serious from that point on. But again, like I said, when I look at the forest industry, again, like I said, I can see, because I've been in this position now for 10 years, that companies are becoming more and more diligent when it comes to lockout for their employees. And we've actually even done a pilot project with Burton's Cove Logging and Lumber a number of years ago. And we went into their facility and we worked with them to upgrade their lockout program. We actually have a video and everything that's on our website, on our YouTube channel. And again, like I said, when it comes to lockout for that facility, the company owner, Fred Osmond, was really, really happy that we had chosen his mill, and he was really happy to work with us.
And I guess that, as well as really brings attention to the importance of partnerships as well, right? Like, it's when we all work together as safety organizations, as WorkplaceNL, as companies, then we can all create and build that safety culture that is so needed in the province. Okay, so let's just have a little conversation about joint responsibility in health and safety. We know that ultimately the employer is responsible to, specific to lockout, tagout, I guess, is to identify all of those sources of energy and put those procedures in place for locking out and tagging out. And then as workers, we all have responsibilities as well to follow any safety precautions that employers put in place for us. How do you see the workers and the employers working together to maintain that safety culture? Have you seen an evolution of more teamwork and engagement of the workers?
Yes. Like I said, when it comes to people, again, like I said, working together to prevent injuries in the workplace, we're seeing that more and more companies are trying to have that positive safety culture. And again, like I said, when it comes to the responsibilities, again, it starts at the bottom and goes to the top. But again, like I said, it also starts at the top and got to come to the bottom. And we're seeing, again, like I said, those supervisors and company owners now being more proactive and making sure that things are in place for their employees to make sure that they are safe. And I know that, supervisors don't like to do things such as following a disciplinary policy and things like that. when it comes to progressive discipline. But the thing is, if we don't do that, unfortunately, there's times when people will continue to do unsafe acts, and it could lead to a very serious injury or, unfortunately, like I said, a fatality. Absolutely. And you can imagine what it's like in a workplace where someone has lost their life due to, not properly locking out a piece of equipment, what that does to the organization as a whole. Because when I go into a workplace, or even when I get people come into our facility for training, I can tell the people that work together and the people who don't work together. Yeah. Because the people who work together are chatting with each other, and they're always tormenting each other as well, picking at each other. Yeah. Because, and like I tell all my students, the people that you work with, that's your work family. And you spend more time in the run of a week with those people than you do with your own family.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you make that connection, it becomes more prevalent and I think more important for you to look after that person as well as looking after yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you look at safety leadership, you're looking at everybody taking that personal responsibility to take care of their coworkers. If you're looking after your coworkers, if you're looking after each other, then you're going to be looking out for yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, DeeAnne, for joining me here today to talk about Lockout, Tagout.